So welcome to FOH Connect. I'm Oraniti Do, the Executive Director of Future of Health, and it's an honor to host today's discussion on navigating today's cyber threats for tomorrow healthcare. As leaders in health sector, our commitment goes beyond immediate care. Today, we come together to tackle the escalating challenges in cybersecurity that threaten our ability to serve and protect. With us today, our FOH co-founder, Professor Eyal Zimlichman, Chief Transformation Officer, Chief Innovation Officer, founder and director of ARC at Sheba Medical Center. The webinar moderator is Charles Chip Khan, FOH co-founder and the president and CEO of Federation of American Hospitals. Our distinguished panel include a U.S. representative, Meredith Graffinti, Senior Managing Director, Global Head of Cybersecurity and Data Privacy Communication at FTI Consulting. From the UK, joining us, Dr. Saif Abed, who is a medical doctor, healthcare cybersecurity leader, and cyber diplomacy expert. Also on the panel are Kim Chuan, Group Chief Information Security Officer at Sync Health from Singapore, and Alon Rosen, CEO of Elements Group, and former Chief of Staff at the Israeli Ministry of Defense and Director General of the Israeli Home Front Defense Ministry. Thank you for joining to explore this important issue. I invite Professor Eyal Zimlichman to share his opening remarks.
Thank you, Ronit, and it's a pleasure to open this very important webinar we have today. For those of you less familiar with FOH, let me start with a few words about what FOH does and what are some of our activities. And then, of course, I'll speak a few words about our current topic for today, and then head it over to Chip to start the panel. So FOH, or Future of Health, is a think tank in many ways of many of the leading organizations around the world. We have about 40 organizations really coming from all the different stakeholders of what we call health today, whether it's providers or payers, policymakers, academia, patient advocacy groups, and industry, all coming together to put forward a vision of what the future of health needs to look like around different topics we're focusing on, and then try to draft a way forward. How do we get from where we are today to where we need to be? We do this through the collective wisdom of these 40 organizations, sharing a lot of success stories, and also bringing more success stories from outside of the organizations. We're working with a leading research institution, which is Duke, to make sure that everything that we do is research studied through qualitative means. And then we work through the New England Journal of Medicine Catalyst to publish much of the work that comes out as we try to reach consensus around these topics and also draw on leading examples for the world to use. We all know that as we are going through transformation efforts globally, and they're much needed in many, many countries around the world, that having a shared vision is critical. And it's really up to this multi-stakeholder group to try and put this vision together. So FOH has been focusing on many, many different topics, from equity to data-driven healthcare, to healthcare without an address, learning health systems, and so on, population health, just to mention a few we've been tackling over the last couple of years. But today we're focusing on somewhat of a different topic. This is not something that FOH has dealt with, but with current events around the world, in the US, but other countries as well, and with a growing threat through cybersecurity, we understand that this is a topic that FOH has to tackle. We cannot talk about the value coming out of data and being data-driven without understanding how do we mitigate some of the risks that come with this. And some countries, as we are very multinational within FOH, have been focused more on the threats, which has really slowed down the progress and the value that can be appreciated through data and digital means. And this is something, of course, that we would like to change. So as we think about what is the value we're drawing from data and how to become data-driven organizations, the flip side to this has to be, how do we mount a successful defense against cyber threats and how to address the current issues that we're seeing in the market. It took us a couple of very large events in the US to really get FOH's attention and really get to this understanding that we need to tackle this as well. And we decided we will start with this webinar and try to get some experts to share with the FOH group and more visitors, what are the best practices, or starting with the threats, what are the current threats, then what are the best practices, just like we do with every FOH activity. And then how do we drive actionable change? How does this lead to organizations actually taking action to make sure that they're much more prepared towards these threats, whether it's on a provider, a payer level, an industry level as well, and what is the threats for patients as well. So these are some of the topics we'll be covering today. And of course, I myself am looking forward to this conversation and to see what else will come out from this initial discussion we're going to start today. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Chip, to take us on this journey. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Eyal, and thanks to Oronit, and thanks to our distinguished panel, and welcome to those in the audience today. Cyber is a central part of every nation's infrastructure, and no one knows that better than those of us in healthcare. The availability and free flow of health information is mission critical to providing care today. Health information exists in our medical records and moves between multiple settings. Many people have and need access to it, and the volume increases exponentially every day. The information is a critical path for both receiving and providing care, but unfortunately, it is also a valuable commodity for bad actors. That makes health information a primary target across the globe. I recently visited with the COO of one of my largest health systems and was not at all surprised to hear him say that cyber was the #1 issue that kept him up at night. I'm happy to be joined today by this esteemed panel of experts from around the world. In the next 45 minutes, our distinguished panelists are going to tell us about how we can protect the information, what the dangers and threats are, and share their experiences and expertise at the front line of fighting cyber attacks. So let's get started. And I'm going to do a round robin and ask Meredith, Saif, and Kim, and then Alon in that order to answer this question. So I'll start with Meredith with this question for all four of you. I'm going to, can you describe the worst breach you've seen and what the significance of that breach was to you?
So that's to me first, right, Chip?
Right.
I'll kick us off here. So as a outside consultant, I think it's difficult for me to name names when it comes to certain companies. I can tell you that, there are a couple pivotal moments, I feel like, where government and industry really woke up to the need to prepare for these attacks. It's not healthcare related, but it is critical infrastructure related. I think back to the Colonial Pipeline attack where, for the first time, I feel like in US history, there were truly physical, tangible implications from a cyber attack. For those of you around the world who are listening that aren't familiar with the Colonial Pipeline incident, it was a ransomware attack on a crude oil pipeline that transported gasoline up and down the east coast of the United States. And because of the need to shut down the pipeline, there was a fuel shortage, to hospitals, to airports, to the pump. So you really saw people, kind of running to gas stations and filling up trash bags full of gasoline, very safe. But for me, that was kind of a moment in which government really started paying attention. And I feel like critical infrastructure of all sorts, including the healthcare industry, really thought about, wow, how and why and what are we doing to prepare for these types of incidents? So I think about that one. I really think about, we saw a case in particular in Australia with Medibank where, there were some blunders, I would say, in the response in terms of, trying to walk the line of being transparent, but getting out ahead of the forensic investigation and sort of, making promises about data impact, saying that certain patient data wasn't affected, and then having to walk that back and getting it wrong. So I think there have been a number of lessons learned, for the healthcare industry over the past few years. And a lot of, my job in particular is helping with that work stream and helping around communications and making sure that when a company is hit by one of these attacks, they are doing everything they can to get to their front lines, to equip them with messaging and talking points, to interact with patients, doctors, associates, payers, providers, all of the healthcare ecosystem. So that's a little bit about my role, a little bit about what I've seen over the past couple of years, and looking forward to talking more about this.
Great. Saif?
So I have to say the attack that I would describe is a moment in history. It really set off the whole subject of cybersecurity in healthcare. It's an old one, but it's a goodie or a baddie, depending on how you phrase it. And it's the WannaCry attack that affected, well, it was opportunistic in the whole world, but it affected the national health system in England. And what's so devastating about it is that, remember, I'm a clinician by background, but somehow I've ended up in the dark arts of cybersecurity for the last 12 years. For me, it's all about patient safety and patient outcomes. So you had 5 major emergency departments shut down during that cyber attack. You had ambulances being diverted. Now, imagine this. If you're a patient suspected of having had a stroke and you have a 3.5 hour window for treatment, and your ambulance gets diverted, that's half an hour diversion, then you enter a queue for another hospital. That could be the difference between making a full recovery or being half paralyzed for the rest of your life. You had cancer appointments canceled at scale. You had operating theaters not able to do operations, let alone primary care was completely messed up during that period. And ever since then, I've worked with government agencies all around the world, whether they're on the defense side or on the healthcare side, and also at the global government agency level. These are public health crises. And I think, Chip, I was mentioning to you before, I view this the same way the opioid epidemic is being viewed as a public health crisis. This is how damaging these attacks are. We saw during COVID so many cyber attacks on healthcare infrastructure, healthcare organizations. We saw a national level cyber attack against the Irish health system that shut down 5 major cancer centers. I mean, really, I'd say the WannaCry attack was the progenitor for healthcare really being on the hit list for ransomware gangs, and it also entering that target, that gray space between the interest of cyber criminals, but also the interest of entities involved in cyber warfare as well, and how they could mask their behavior through criminal gangs. So yeah, I'd really say the WannaCry attack was the seed and the most significant moment that kicked off unfortunate events for the last decade or so.
Kim?
I got to agree with Dr. Saif. WannaCry was quite a major event. I remember being woken up by my wife at 10 p.m. at night, and she said there was a BBC report that you got to see, And when I saw the news, I had to make that dreaded phone call to my boss to wake him up and tell him that I think this thing is going to come to us, and we got to get ready. And fortunately, we got everyone up at midnight and prepared for the wave of attack, which fortunately didn't arrive. But for me, the cyber attack which is most memorable is the one that's most personal, and the one that affects your organization and your customers. And back in 2018, I was working in the shared IT services organization that supports all the public hospitals in Singapore, including SingHealth, where I am now. And we experienced a relatively sophisticated attack on our EMR systems in 2018. A threat actor was detected on our network sometime in July of 2018, and by the time we took the few days to confirm it and close down the attack, we were just a few days too late. The threat actors were able to exfiltrate over 1 million patient records from our system, and a very humbling experience. Taught us a lot. Although we didn't suffer any systems outages or disruption to our services, we took a lot of lessons from the incident, and of course, including never to underestimate the adversary. Was highly skilled, very patient, specialized, and there were teams of them working together to pull off the attack. And it was a hard lesson to learn, and we hope that we never have to go through the same experience again.
Alon?
So first of all, like Meredith, I'm in a problem to open things that happens in our customer side, but
Sure.
I will talk in very high level and general about things that already published. So I agree with Dr. Saif regarding the WannaCry. It's one of the craziest attacks ever in the history of cyber until now. I debated when I saw this question. When I heard this question. I debated between the WannaCry or the Stuxnet attack, because the Stuxnet attack angled or create a new area of different attacks in OT areas. In the end, we have a lot of data running into hospitals, running into data centers, and so on, but we are leaning on operational technology, cybersecurity infrastructures, from generators to cooling towers via the electricity, the healthcare equipment, and so on, everything based on ICSs, on industrial control systems. And I think that it's a huge gap. It's a worldwide gap, you can say, regarding this matter or issue, and it can be open for different vectors of attacking on our most critical and crucial infrastructures worldwide. I can tell you that one thing that we were part of in some matters is the attack against water infrastructures in Israel on April 2020, when Iran tried, or according to the media, Iran tried to attack different entities that dealing with water in different areas in Israel, and try to, it's an OT, by the way, an OT attack as well, try to mix some measurements of different materials that go in through the water in order to clean them, and so on. Those kind of attacks are extremely terrible. It's attacks to create a biological terror, and this is one of the things that, in my personal, I saw that really afraids me. And by the way, it's connect directly to the areas of healthcare. The same terror attacks can be held in healthcare facilities, or for different companies that dealing with drugs and those kind of things.
So I'm going to address this to Saif and Kim. So from your experiences with these events, did they change behavior on the ground in terms of what the facilities, the institutions, those working in the institutions do? Was there a sufficient sort of response in terms of, and I'm not talking about the mitigation, but in terms of sort of moving forward? Did it change behavior, or did the vulnerabilities continue?
I'm happy to take it.
Yeah, Saif, why don't you start, and then Kim
So
make some comments.
For a national health system, definitely there was a huge investment that came after the horse had bolted, if you will. You would see the equivalent of the team responsible for cybersecurity, from my understanding, within a few months grew from 6 to 60. The levels of investment that were involved, the development of a national cybersecurity operations center, perimeter security investments, really from a standing start, really huge investments went in. Does that mean that the UK or any other country in the world, for that matter, that has experienced these kinds of cyber attacks are at the level of cyber maturity that they should be? The answer is no, because healthcare is complex. Each individual hospital, clinic, arm's length body that's involved in healthcare or public health facility, it's so difficult for most of them just to understand what assets they have in their environments, let alone to identify the vulnerabilities and the threats. It's really difficult. So yes, again, these events were a catalyst. Have things kept pace as much as they should? Is it easy to forget? I think it is easy to forget once a little bit of time has evolved. It's human nature, unfortunately. So you really need strong regulators, strong government to stay on top of this, and you really need executive leadership in healthcare organizations to not just buy in, but to buy in through action. And we can get to the supply chain, I'm sure, at a later part of this conversation. So yes, some change is being driven, not necessarily enough. I'll just add one point. I think in healthcare, there's an obsession with digital transformation. We're excited about new technologies, and often we adopt new technology without any safeguards whatsoever. And that's what makes healthcare so attractive to attack.
Great. Kim?
Well, no question. After that incident, we had to rethink our entire security posture. We ramped up the awareness across the whole, not just in SingHealth, of course, but across the whole country, all the public healthcare institutions. Internet access was severely curtailed at that time to help us take stock of where the attacks came in and where we needed to strengthen. And life has been quite different from the clinician colleagues of mine. For many people in the public healthcare institutions in Singapore, access to the internet was a lot more complicated than previously, as you would expect, because that's where the main route of attack was, and we needed some time to shore up our defenses. 5 years from now, since we have gradually reviewed some of the security and measures, and we have in some cases where we think the risk trade-offs are sufficient, we have gradually loosened up the security to I wouldn't say loosen up, but we adjusted the security measures a little bit. But all that was necessary because we didn't really want to have to deal with that another cyber attack again. Yeah.
Alon, what do you consider the state of the art here? I mean, obviously, SAFE has made the point that this is a 24/7 ongoing issue. It evolves over time. Unfortunately, it involves human beings as well as technology. So what is the state of the art of cyber defense today?
It's a tough question because I think there is not state of the art. The cyber is like the technology is all the time evolving, meaning that all the time things have been changed dramatically. Take, for example, AI. It's a black hole. It's a huge black hole that nobody knows how to take care of it. Mix AI with cyber. Do you have today state-of-the-art different tools that you can implement in some organization in order to protect you? I'm not sure, because the AI is providing different arenas and mixing different arenas from different vectors and those kind of things. So it's a little bit problematic to put and say there is something that is state of the art. There is a lot of advanced things, and the cyber defense is extremely advanced. Each year on every team of attackers, there is 100 brilliant teams that create defense for those kind of attacks and thinking out of the box how to create the next level of defense from out of band level or level 0, as you can say, until the highest level of packet of information. But I think that we need to remember 3 main things. First of all, there is no foolproof. There is no 100% ability to defend ourselves. The second thing is the technology is all the time creating more and more challenges and all the time moving forward. And we are, as Dr. Saif said, we are freaks of bringing into the healthcare systems, bring new technology, innovation, new systems, new softwares that can create a huge gaps in our systems. And we talked about AI, see the issue with the different municipalities globally with the area of smart city. The smart city create a huge options, or a lot of options for legacy systems to be hidden by hackers. So I think it's the best way is to think that there is a lot of different components in order to create defense, but it's defense. It's not give us the full capability or 100% ability to control or to eliminate events. And this is why basically you must have a kind of a mitigation plan in order to tackle those events and to know how to recover from them. I think this is the best way if you are do a tabletop exercises or technology exercises on one side, and the other side put very tight and lean mitigation plan. And on top of it, of course, put a lot of technologies in order to protect yourself in different levels. You will receive the state of the art for today.
Meredith, Alon in his intro mentioned a terrorism motivation for the attack that he referred to. Obviously, the Change Healthcare attack on United that just occurred probably had to do mostly with money, but a little bit with mayhem, and a little bit, we'll find out eventually, with use of the data that was stolen. What are the implications of these motivations in terms of how facilities and institutions should think about preparing themselves for attacks, and in a sense also Alon's last point, thinking about how they would mitigate, assuming that you can't stop everything?
Sure, it's a great question. Let me start by talking about motivations. What we tend to see with ransomware threat actor groups is they're primarily financially motivated. Their end goal is to secure a payment, right? Usually as large of a payment as possible. In the old days, we saw straight encryption of systems and then extortion of, organizations for a key to unlock those systems. Then we sort of moved into double extortion, which is encryption of systems, which causes the disruption and mayhem, and then stealing data as a second form of extortion. So now the threat actor has 2 legs to stand on when it comes to extorting, both for the key and for the return of data. Now what we're seeing is, because less organizations, I would say over the past year or so, have really been paying, they're trying to make the disruption and the extortion process as crazy as possible and as painful as possible, whether that's, also sending harassment emails to employees, or calling executives' phones directly, or, using AI to distort images of executives and sending those around to employees, death threats. We've really seen it all in terms of the desperation with these attackers. trying to secure payment. But I would say kind of the overall motivation is financial. And then, of course, you know, if they can't monetize the attack itself and they don't secure a payment, oftentimes we'll see them turn to the dark web for trying to sell the data for some sort of financial gain or publicly embarrass the company to, you know, make sure that their next victims are more inclined to pay. So as big of a show as they can put on, the better. Now, of course, that motivation, that modus operandi pretty much changes when we're talking about a nation state or, you know, a country in particular. For various nation states, obviously the motivation is more on the intelligence gathering side. What can we learn about this company from an IP standpoint? What can we learn about their customers, the data that they manage? So that's a real kind of shift. It's less about publicly embarrassing the company. It's more about, can we steal their source code, their IP, or can we learn something from the data that they manage or process? In terms of mitigating these attacks, I think the best form of mitigation is truly preparedness. It's not what shiny tool or technology can you put in place. It is how complete, how comprehensive are your preparedness plans? And I'm not talking about putting templates and media holding statements down on paper that are fill in the blank. It's really about roles and responsibilities and who's going to be in charge of what, who the ultimate decision maker is, how organized are work streams in an incident response scenario, and how does information flow back and forth between work streams so everyone's on the same page. I think the biggest disruption we tend to see and the biggest pain point for organizations is around their communications. And when you think about healthcare systems, let's take hospital systems in general, you've got, you know, local hospitals to communicate with, you've got frontline doctors, patients, you've got big vendors that provide services to you that may or may not disconnect from your network. You've got insurers to deal with, and that's a lot. Regulators, media, you know, it's just a lot of influx that you have to triage. So the more that you can put a plan down on paper for how you're going to proactively manage that set of communications and practice it, drill, tabletop, simulate, the better off you may be in the end when it comes to responding and mitigating.
Let me go around and we mentioned ransom. Should you pay or shouldn't you pay? I obviously there's always a context, but what are the views? Someone just alone, a Saif, Kim, whoever.
So I think it's them. You want to start?
No,
Yeah,
go
why don't
ahead.
you start?
Go for it. Go for it.
Go for it.
Okay, I think you have to look at the facts of the situation. This has been happening long enough that we know that the majority of occasions, if you pay, you're not going to get your data or system access back in a lot of situations. I think the last study that I saw was something around 55 to 45% chance whether you'd get your system access or data access back, number one. Number two, if you pay a ransom, there's no guarantee that they haven't incentivized another ransomware group not to come after you and say, hey, look, guys, we'll sell you the data. You can go and try and extort them again. So it's not protecting you in any way, shape, or form in that regard. And third, I would say it also, the payment of ransoms has encouraged attacks on healthcare generally. Now, I'm going to be a clinician now. I'm going to be a medical doctor. If I was chief medical officer in a hospital and you told me we can't get access to our IoT systems that we're using in the intensive care lab or in the cardiac cath lab or in the operating room because we don't want to pay these bad guys over here, me as a clinician, I'm just thinking, do whatever it takes so I can look after my patients who are at risk right now. So there is this challenge in the boardroom to understand their environment and, as Meredith said, to have preparedness addressed in such a way that the clinicians don't feel that pressure and dependency on their technology. They know what systems to move to, whether that's pen and paper or other communication systems. They have a well-drilled, well-planned way of addressing the risks to maintain patient safety so that they don't feel that pressure that makes the boardroom then think, do we need to pay this ransom or not? But that's the kind of the challenge. I say don't pay, but you really need to be prepared so that you don't face that pressure in the first place.
Kim, and then I'll go to Alon. Oh, Alon, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Alon.
So I totally agree with Dr. Saif. I think it's a $1 million question, literally, and it's very complex because I think you need to put on the scale a lot of different angles, because you need to, first of all, you need to ask yourself a lot of questions. For example, can you recover without paying the ransom? This is one question. The other question is, what will be did the attacker will come back and will attack you again if you will pay him? What will be the part, or if he will fulfill his part of the agreement after you will pay him, that he will give you what you expected to get. Of course, it's a issue of legal. In different countries, it's illegal to pay different attackers. And the biggest question, I think, who is attacking you? It's a hacker independently. It's a group of hackers that works for themselves, works for competition, works for government. If it's a government entity, I think it's a huge question mark you need to put all the time above your head in order to find the right decision if paying or not. This is why you cannot say if yes or not to pay. It's a lot of different dependents. And I think that in the end, you cannot create guidelines to put a clear answer. You need to put different questions that you need to ask yourself. Of course, it's connecting directly to the preparedness matter. If you will put under the light of the neons above my head, I will put the right questions. When attack will happen, I will know to ask myself those questions and give myself the answer.
Kim?
In Singapore, we have a national policy not to negotiate with the cyber threat actors, so no ransoms to be paid, and our strategy is not to assume that they will give in and give us the key back. So we'll just have to prepare accordingly.
Let me ask. I guess Alon might be the. I'll ask you. We had an audience question about how good is quantum encryption? Do you have a view on that, or
not a clear view?
I have a view.
Anybody else, Saif?
Yeah, I have a view. Okay, so homomorphic encryption, quantum computing, all of this sounds very exciting. Unbreakable encryption. Let's just put it this way. Social engineering is the way to break any encryption. So if I can call you or send you a spreadsheet and say, hey, look, here's the nursing rota for the next week. Click on it and open it. Or here's your pay slip for your last, medical shift. And you click on that. Doesn't matter how good your encryption is, we're into the system. So I think let's not get, again, excited by the bright and shiny technology when there's so many easy ways to get around it. So that would just be a really important point to raise on that. So
the dilemma that I'm hearing is, and really, Saif, you just referred to it, which is, a chain is only as each link in a chain is only as strong as the weakest link. And the problem here is, regardless of the technology, we have humans involved. And so, as we've sort of said, I think bad things are going to happen no matter how good the walls are that you build. So that being recognized, let me ask Meredith, what is generally happening with the data when it gets out there? how is it being used when it is stolen generally, or is there a generalization here?
I think it's hard to say in terms of a generalization. We see a number of things happen. We see threat actors post massive amounts of files to their shame sites. Then you see other, groups try to download it, sift through it, and, glean if there are any personal details that could be used for identity theft. We also see threat actors try to monetize data they've stolen by selling it on the dark web if the company doesn't pay to get it back. So a number of things, could happen. It's really tough to kind of have a blanket statement on what they do with it. Not sure if any of the other panelists have different views from a technical point of view there.
Does anyone else have a view of what well, because I think part of what you need to worry about is if your data is going to get out there, I mean, is there anything you can do to prepare with it, or what is the sort of worst case that you're going to have to think about if you're handling data that you have to handle to provide healthcare services and also do the financing side of healthcare? Anyone else have a view? This is a tough one.
I think the combination between data that have been stolen to implementation. I think that in the end, when somebody have my data, and with AI today, it can do an avatar that talks like me, that looks like me, that have all my data, it's start to be a problematic situation. I think this is the worst nightmare that we can go through using data that have been stolen in cyber attacks. This is why I told you in earlier that AI it's a huge black hole regarding cybersecurity.
What do you think the proper role is? And I'll throw it out to whoever wants to grab, for government in this case. Obviously, we're dealing with various sizes of nation states here represented around our table. But the United States has the NSA and FBI and other entities that are supposedly having their own walls. What should government be doing, or can we depend on it? Now, obviously, with NHS, they're synonymous, but in a sense, the institutions are still somewhat separate from the government itself.
So if I can pick up on that, yes. So having advised, a lot of government agencies, I'm going to say the same thing that all of them can do, from the smallest nation state to the largest nation states in the world. I think there needs to be an acceptance that the IT supply chain is broken. We haven't touched on this, but I really want to. We have some of the biggest IT suppliers in the world operating in healthcare environments, and they're doing the absolute minimum they can to tick cyber security checkboxes just to get through procurement, and then they hope no one ever checks on them again. They might have an ISO 27001 certificate, and they just hope they can breeze on by with that. No one's auditing them or anything like that, let alone the tens of thousands of startups that are in healthcare environments without any cyber checklist. So government has a really critical role in regulating the suppliers that are essentially operators of essential services now. They're part of the national critical infrastructure. We need to regulate them. We need to make sure they are checked on constantly, they are audited, and we need to make sure that the executives of healthcare organizations understand that they have a responsibility to make sure not only at procurement are the checks happening, but throughout the life cycle of technology being in your environment that patients are dependent on and clinicians are dependent on, that the same suppliers, doesn't matter how big they are or how small they are, they're being checked on, and there are appropriate penalties for non-compliance with what is, protecting public health. So I have a very strong view on that.
Healthcare, in my point of view, health, and again, I agree with Dr. Saif. Healthcare is a strategic and national, or even federal sometimes, asset. And this is why basically the different governments need to put, first of all, regulation. I think that more than regulation, they need to take a role in creating intelligence capabilities for the public sector or the critical infrastructure sector. The third thing that they need to do is to create the IR teams in order to help manage attacks that have been hitting those kind of, let's say, critical assets or national or federal assets that are private owned, and we have those kind of things. Healthcare is one of the simples in this case. And two more things that I think that all the time we are miss them. One thing is to create awareness. Government need to create awareness for the population, for the citizens. And this is one thing. And the other thing, it's the most important one, and we need to put the light on that. We need to educate. We need to educate our next generation how to understand the threat, how to tackle this threat, how to manage our life that depends today on a lot of different technology things, how to manage and shrink dramatically our exposure for those kind of threats. So this is, in my point of view, and I served in the government a few days. This is the role of the government worldwide, especially in Israel. By the way, this is my 2 shekels, as we say in Israel, 2 shekels on these points.
Other view? Anybody else? Kim?
Yeah, I think government has a big role to play in cyber because cyber is a global issue. And then no single country, no single company can deal with it on its own. And government agencies are the best at international cooperation and coordination. So, and the areas where government can help and which the cybersecurity agency in Singapore is doing quite well is looking at funding for special areas, innovation, AI research, threat intelligence, coordination, skilling, upsizing of the cybersecurity manpower for workforce in the country, and then of course the regulations to enhance and strengthen areas which are a little bit deficient and specific sectors that need more help than others. Yeah, so big role as far as I'm concerned. I think it's indispensable actually.
Meredith, do you have any other comments about?
No, I don't think so. I think the team has covered it quite well.
I'd like to drill down on something, Saif, that was implied by your comments. And let's sort of take the Change Healthcare. And for those that don't know, Change Healthcare is a huge clearinghouse that much of the financial going between providers and insurers in the United States, that 40 or 50% of it went through this clearinghouse. And it seems to me it points to a problem, and you implied it in talking about government role, is if you're a hospital system or even a physician or physician's office in the United States, you have all these third parties you have to deal with, and you're dependent on the certifications that they come to you and say, well, we're certified, don't worry about us. What do we need to, how good are, well, let me ask 2 questions. One, how good are those certifications right now? And it was implied that maybe they're not good enough. And second, if you're a provider and have to deal with third parties, what do you need to know about the third party, and how should you think about how you send your information around, which you have to do?
Yeah. So let me give you 2 ends of the spectrum here. The one that everyone knows, ISO 27001 and 27002, classic for kind of cybersecurity assurance and risk management. But then we have just this December, ISO 42001, risk management for AI came out. And that's going to be, trust me, that's going to be the big thing. We're doing a lot of work there. The challenge here is it's become a checkbox for procurement, in my opinion. ISO is good. ISO is really good. And in the moment when you get audited and a real auditor steps in and goes, we've checked everything and it's legit, that's fantastic. But what happens in the 2 or 3 year intervening period between audits, if other audits happen at all? And let's say you say the physician's office, let's not say a huge hospital, let's say a physician's office, still dependent on 15, 20, 50, 100 different suppliers of IT systems. That physician's office does not have the capability to review all the audits and request all the audits. So there's a real challenge here. And that's where having a strong regulator that's asking for, okay, give us your annual audit or give us your biannual, your 6-monthly audit. We're going to review it, we're going to check it, and then we're going to report to all your customers that everything is still assured to a level that it should be based on these international standards that we use or based on these national standards that we use. Is that a get out of jail free card? Does that mean you're not going to experience cyber attacks through these suppliers? No, but you're in a plausible position to say we've attempted to assure ourselves and our customers who are patients and other partners that we take the security of our supply chain and therefore patient data and clinical systems seriously. But we really need strong regulators, maybe like Alon suggested, we need a collaborative entity between the healthcare agencies and the intelligence agencies to come together and form its own kind of regulatory body or assurance body that just deals with the supply chain. But it is that, for me, it's really quite a big step that needs to be taken, and very few nations have taken that step. And maybe it's just because maybe slightly controversial way to end the session. Maybe there is some lobbying that happens from some of these suppliers that makes it difficult to reach that kind of equitable position. But I think it's good for everyone if the supply chain works and it's secure and we can provide assurance. It really is.
So we're getting to the end of the hour, and why don't I go around again, and I'll do it in reverse of where I started, and just said, considering all the discussion we've had, what for our audience is the main takeaway that you think they should have regarding protecting themselves? And I'll start with Alon, and then go to Kim and Saif and Meredith to close out. Alon?
That cyber attack, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And you need to prepare yourself. Not less than you need to protect yourself with different systems.
Kim?
I think it's important to remind ourselves that no one can ever prevent or guarantee that a cyber attack won't happen. We need to be ready. We need to do all that we can to make it as difficult as possible, and we need to have a certain mindset that when it does happen, or when it happens, we know how to respond and as quickly as we can.
Saif?
Yeah, so a cyber attack, whether it's against a healthcare facility or a chemical, biological, radionuclear facility, or a utility like water, like Alon mentioned before, cybersecurity is a patient safety issue. Cybersecurity is a public health issue. View it through that lens and plan and prepare from that perspective. Don't look at it as a tech issue, and then you'll be making the right steps in the right direction.
Great. Meredith?
I think it's a little bit of a reiteration what I said before on preparedness planning and really putting value and importance on communications in that preparedness planning. It's responding to a breach is difficult, but if it's handled correctly, that's what people really remember about an incident, is the way in which you responded and communicated to all of your stakeholder groups. So I would just encourage the audience to really place emphasis on that and think through it as you're preparing.
This has been great. I want to thank our panel. I'm sure that our audience found the conversation useful, and we'll put it up. We're also going to make it available through a podcast. Hospitals in Focus at the Federation of American Hospitals has. We'll do that in a few weeks. Let me also say that Saif is a recent publication with the WHO that's very important. We'll put that up on the website and make that available. So with that, I'll hand the baton back to Oronit to close out.
So as we conclude today's session, I want to express my deepest appreciation to our panelists for the expert contribution, and to you, Chip, for skillfully guiding our discussion. Thank you all for participating in FOH Connects. We look forward to welcome you in our future events, where we will continue to shape the future of health. Stay safe and stay connected. Thank you all.